So my name is Lauren Finns, and I was a professor at the University of Idaho in the College of Natural Resources, which probably back then wasn't called the College of Natural Resources. It was probably um, wildlife, forestry, wildlife, and recreation, maybe. Um, anyway, I had heard about Taylor Ranch from probably the time that I first got to Idaho, to the college. And lots of people were going in there and they were saying how gorgeous it was and what a wonderful experience. And here it is, this station in the middle of a wilderness area. And anyway, I was anxious to just sort of experience it. So at some point, my daughter was either 10 or 12. We decided that we would hike in, and we decided not to go the long route along the river. We decided to hike over the mountains and down in. So we hired a plane, landed at Cold Meadows, and then hiked in to Taylor. And it was really a wonderful experience. I mean, it was really remarkable to see this station in the middle of a wilderness area. And I think Janet Pope had started on the new cabin by that time. And if she hadn't already started it, it would come soon after that. And I was just astonished that all this research was going on in the middle of this wilderness area, that there was this station with an actual, with houses. And it was so antithetical to my idea of a wilderness area, because wilderness areas that I had been in before didn't have structures. So it was an interesting blend of serving the scientific purpose and this wilderness station that we could learn so much from.
Was it the wilderness experience that motivated you and your family to want to hike in? Were you kind of seeking that?
Yeah, yeah. Dave and I had hiked in Desolation Wilderness when we were in California, and I just loved that experience of just being away from people. Of course, in Desolation, you're not really away from people very much, but there are moments. There are moments. Yeah, this whole idea of wilderness is really intriguing and appealing to me. I mean, you can see where I live. There aren't a lot of houses around here. There's not a lot of traffic. I like the quiet. So that idea of being in the middle of this amazing, huge number of acres, miles and miles of no traffic, except the occasional airplane, was really intriguing. I mean, I wanted to be there. And so I think part of the appeal of doing the white bark pine research that we did later was that we would be able to do it in the middle of this wilderness area. So it doesn't get better than that.
Do you remember anything about the hike in? Anything you saw? Animals or?
We didn't see a lot of critters going in. Um, it was arduous. I remember it was arduous, and I was probably carrying 50 pounds. Dave was carrying 75. Tracy was probably carrying 35. And then Dave had to offload about 10 pounds to Tracy because I couldn't carry any more than I was already carrying. So I felt really guilty about loading this extra 10 pounds on our 10-year-old or 12-year-old, but Dave couldn't do it anymore because he had the shin splints. So I do remember that. That was a tough thing to do, but just hiking in, just the experience of going through the woods and again the quiet of that, and the sense that you're making progress toward this end, and yet you're in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, it was neat. But I don't remember seeing critters. We did later.
You mentioned rattlesnakes.
Yeah, yeah. There, along the river, there's a huge number of rattlesnakes, and probably in my memory, this one rattlesnake has gotten exaggerated, but it seems to me it was this big around, and I saw it sort of literally snake in and, out of the grass and back in again, and just scared the bejesus out of me. And Holly had us, anybody that came to the camp had to do work. You had to sort of earn your keep. And so she had us pulling spotted knapweed. So she had a project where she was measuring how much knapweed was there and how it decreased over time. So every year she had whoever was there and the interns that were there would pull knapweed and put it in big plastic bags. I don't know if she told you about this, the big black plastic bags. And then she would keep track of how many per year. So I was there, my daughter was there. And my daughter told me later that I almost stepped on a rattlesnake when I was in there pulling knapweed. And she saw it and Holly saw it, but they didn't tell me because they were afraid that I would scream and jump and startle the snake. So I was just blithely pulling knapweed without noticing. Anyway, yeah. And I also remember there was, I think he was an undergraduate student who was looking at how far the rattlesnakes travel from their nest. Did they tell you about that? And at the time that I was there, he had measured a distance of, I think it was 2 miles, which was way farther than they ever thought that rattlers traveled from their nest. So what a great project for an undergraduate, for anyone actually, but particularly for an undergraduate.
Yeah, Holly and Jim are both really big on a wilderness or an experiential education. They're always referring to old Idaho in their conversation about Taylor, about wanting to teach like the old ways of self-sustenance, whether it's hang with a team of mules, or just
Right.
teaching like basic hydrological principles and all that stuff. And was that ever discussed with you guys, or was it just like work?
Oh, well, we could see that, and I knew that they were doing that with the students, and I didn't have to do any of that. But yeah, I was just astonished at how they could make a life out there. Some supplies were brought, obviously some supplies were brought in, but they were just really making it work, and they would stay there for months at a time and made a life there. It was remarkable. And they were teaching students how to bridle animals and how to hook them up. Just how to be more self-sufficient. I'm sure for those students it was life-changing.
Taylor is, as you've kind of noted, it's a place of comings and goings. People flying in and out all the time, with the exception of Jim and Holly or whoever's managing it. And I'm wondering what stays with you when you leave Taylor and you've gone back to civilization. Is there anything that remains with you?
Oh. Well, yeah, using Taylor as a base, I was able to get to the White Bark Pines, and they're higher up. And just being in that environment is awe-inspiring. So just this is going to sound weird, but it just feeds my soul. And it's very emotional. So to be able to have a place that you can fly into, which still astonishes me, and use that as a base, and then be able to hike up in just a few hours and be in those high places with those very old, amazing trees that don't grow everywhere, you know, and they're also in danger because people thought that they didn't get blister rust because blister rust hadn't reached the higher elevations yet. But when we were there, we did see blister rust. So to know that they were in danger also, it's a keystone species. So to know that I was there, that I got to be there, experience that environment, those trees, while they were still there, is pretty amazing.
Was blister rust introduced? It was?
Yeah.
That makes me think of wilderness again, in that it's a space that we've defined as untrammeled by man.
Yeah.
And here you are, probably on the top of Dave Lewis Peak or somewhere way up there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good hike to get to the White Barks.
Yeah.
That's like, I don't know, 3,000, maybe 4,000 feet of elevation.
That was a tough hike. I only did that once, but my student did that more than once.
And here you are, you get to the top after a couple hours, and there's blister rust, and it beat you to the peak, and it was introduced by somebody, even though we've excluded them in the abstract from wilderness.
Yeah.
Well, what does that say about our idea of wilderness to you?
Well, I probably know too much, because the whole idea of wilderness is a sort of pseudo-European, white person, colonial kind of concept, because Native Americans were here long before we were, and so that's one thing, and the idea that landscapes remain unchanged for eons of time is ludicrous. Anybody who knows anything about ecology and succession knows that things change over time. So that's one thing. But the fact that blister rust was introduced and did so much damage in such a short period of time is disheartening. We've certainly in western white pine, we've changed the Idaho forests enormously through blister rust, and then also through harvesting, of course. I don't think that blister rust is going to do as much damage in white bark pine as it did with western white pine, because I don't think blister rust is happy up at those elevations. But still, yeah, it's sad. It makes me sad, for lack of a better. That's not very eloquent, but yeah, it's disheartening. On the other hand, they're still there. They're still there. And nature does have a way of rebounding. And it may not be the same as what it was, but it comes back. You know, that idea that nature abhors a vacuum, that's really true. So it would be interesting to come back in 100 years, see what it looks like then.
You were there. Were you there before the fire?
Um,
The fire was 2001.
2001.
Diamond Point or Diamond Creek fire.
Yeah. So I remember Jim and Holly telling about the fire. Okay. So it was in 2001, and so that's 21 years ago, and my daughter is 36, so she would have been 15. So we were there before the fire.
So you need to go back.
Yeah.
It's already happened. The thing
That's true.
you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. That's right.
My idea of Taylor is completely different from yours for that reason.
So can you tell me what you see?
When I first climbed the cliff above Cliff Creek, opposite Taylor, to get a good look at the Pioneer drainage,
Yeah.
I don't think I saw any standing timber. I saw standing dead, but I don't think I saw any live timber. There is some,
Wow.
but it's in very, very small pockets,
Uh-huh.
higher up. But it's completely nuked. That was a hot fire.
So did it go into the white bark pine? Did it get that high?
Yeah, it got high. Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know. I didn't get to the top of Dave Lewis when I was there. I didn't get above. I don't think I got above 7,000. I was just running around trying to get interviews.
Yeah.
But I feel like you guys should go back.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember when Ben graduated. Did you talk to Ben?
I emailed Ben. I didn't get a response, but I'll send him another one.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when he graduated, because I retired in 2012. And I retired in 2012. I'm trying to remember when Ben graduated, and I'm thinking it was 2008, in which case I would have been there, but I don't remember the devastation. I don't remember seeing that. But I should go back anyway. The cabin's still there, right? It didn't harm Taylor Ranch, right? It didn't get into Taylor Ranch. They protected Taylor Ranch, right?
There was only one minor structure that burned.
Yeah.
Yeah. It almost got Jim and Holly.
I know.
Close.
I remember them.
Yeah.
I remember Holly was out in a field, and she covered herself with wet blankets, and she was with somebody else. Yeah, it was scary.
Yeah, it was a close call for them. Yeah. Can you maybe just briefly summarize the research you were doing up there?
We were trying to just get a baseline measure of how much blister rust was in white bark pine in as many populations as we could reach, and just look at levels and variability across the Frank Church. That's it in a nutshell. And we also looked at mountain pine beetle as well. So, yeah, that was. Oh, and we looked at regeneration also to see how much regeneration there was, and whether the blister rust had gotten into the regen.
Do you remember what you guys found?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was going to look at Ben's thesis, and I forgot to do that. So, I mean, what I can tell you is that it was there, it was present, it was variable. Some populations had very little, some had more. It wasn't like Western white pine where it was in some western white pine populations, it's just essentially wiped out the entire population. It wasn't at that level. So if you want to pause, I can go and look.
No. Is that because of the elevation or the temperature, you think, and not something to do with the host? Or
No, white bark pine is very susceptible. It's susceptible, but I think the blister rust isn't happy or doesn't have the conditions for infection as often. It needs moist, sort of foggy conditions to germinate, generally in the fall. I think the alternate hosts are there, but I think it's moving slower. And again, I haven't been there, I haven't been back there, and I don't know how much it's invaded since we were there. And I don't know if anybody's been back to re-monitor.
There is somebody doing research out there on white barks named Jan Idle.
Oh yeah.
But I think his research is kind of sporadic, and I don't know if it's ongoing or not.
Okay.
But
I should get in touch with him.
Yeah.
And because we've got all the GPS coordinates for the stands that Ben looked at. And so if Jan is doing any sort of monitoring, he'd want Ben's work as a baseline to see how things have changed.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Let's see. When you were there, did you encounter signs of the indigenous presence?
Nothing that I remember. Well, there are some petroglyphs along the river, and we saw those just when I was there with Dave and Tracy. Other than that, I don't remember seeing any. Are there a lot?
When I was there, I was hiking with a hydrologist working on springs,
Mm-hmm.
and we did come across some old hunting blinds, some stone hunting blinds.
Oh.
And there is just downstream of Taylor, there's a site that Jim thinks was a funeral pyre, and who knows, but there's a set of pictographs below an overhang that's like very blackened with soot.
Yeah.
And Jim is right in that it doesn't feel like a place where you'd ever want to build a campfire to stay warm. It's too exposed. So he thinks it's obviously a sacred site, but he thinks that it was connected to a burial of some kind. And that's just off the trail. Most people don't know about it.
Yeah.
And then while I was there, the Forest Service archaeologist just stumbled upon an 8,000-year-old spear point on the Big Creek Trail.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
I just read a book called Origin. Have you read it?
Is that by Meltzer or?
No, it's by Jennifer Raff, and she's reviewing all of the evidence for how long people have been in the Americas, and then evidence for where they came from. And they know that people have been here at least 14,000 years. And there are some archaeologists who think that maybe people have been here 30,000 years. And apparently there's some people who think it goes back to 130,000 years. And the evidence is pretty clear that people came from Siberia and Southeast Asia, and that they used boats to come down the West Coast.
The Kelp
And
Highway.
yeah, the Kelp Highway. And I didn't know anything about that until I read this book. I just read it and just finished it probably last week. Yeah.
I need to read that.
Yeah, it's really, it's very dense, but very informative. It's good.
There are good scientists at U Idaho who still think that people have only been in the Americas for 11,000 years. It's pretty frustrating.
No, there's evidence.
I know
Good
they
evidence.
just refuse to look at it because I think they've stopped reading
Oh.
articles. You read a bunch when you're getting your PhD and then
Right.
you stop.
Because then you have to teach and do other research.
It's really frustrating.
You let your graduate students do that, and they tell you what's out there.
Yeah. Even though there's a site on the Salmon River, it's probably 5 years old, and it's just discovered, but
Yeah.
they're dating tools and points to 15 to 18. So it's obvious now.
15 to 18,000 years ago?
Yeah.
Wow. On the Salmon River?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the footprints in New Mexico, White Sands Desert are 21.
Right. Yeah, she talks about that.
Yeah. So I think it's incontrovertible.
Yeah.
I forget.
Incontrovertible.
Yeah, there you go.
So that answers the question about wilderness. I mean, there were people there, and they made changes, and they lived there, and they harvested critters, and they hunted. They I don't know if they planted, but they definitely hunted. So we weren't the first, and to put a fence around it, an imaginary fence. Yes, it preserves it in a less developed state, and that's a good thing. But to think that it will never change and that it has never changed is ludicrous.
What do you think draws us to that idea, though, or inspires us for some reason? What is it that we find comforting or inspiring with a concept like that, do you think?
With the concept of wilderness, or the
Yeah.
idea that we can sort of go back to nature?
They might be the same thing.
No, I don't think they are. I think the idea of wilderness encompasses the idea that we're letting nature take its course, right? And that whatever happens, although we have in the past put out fires and done other things, but in general, letting nature take its course, whatever happens. And there's something really powerful about that idea, and that we can go and visit that and see what that looks like. Again, a very powerful idea, almost spiritual. Yeah, I guess I can say that. The idea of touching nature, I mean, you can touch nature in a park. That's probably a bad example. Here, I feel like I'm surrounded by nature. Bears come through from time to time, moose come through from time to time, deer come through all the time, birds. So I'm in touch with the natural world, but this is not a natural environment. So this is powerful for me as a calming place, because there are fewer people than in a city, but in a wilderness area, it's bigger, it's vaster, it's, I think you get to experience how small you are in the universe when you're in wilderness. It's humbling, and it's beautiful. And I'm not a religious person, but my husband keeps trying to convince me that I'm a spiritual person. It's different. But I think there's something very spiritual about wilderness.
Did you have that experience at Taylor and then the Frank Church?
I came close to it there. I had that experience when I went to the Wallowa Wilderness area, because I was by myself. And I think it's easier to get in touch with that when you don't have other people that you're talking to. You don't have a purpose in getting to a place and doing your research. So it's a much quieter, more internal experience when you're by yourself. And if I had been in the Frank Church by myself, I think I would have had that. I came close. I did have one sort of terrifying experience in the Frank Church. Well, Ben was working in one area on the east side of the Frank Church, and I was just going to go in and work with him for a few days, and we were driving along in a Jeep on this dirt road, and it's one track, right? And there was a snowdrift. I think it was June, might have been July, and a snowdrift across the road. We couldn't get through. It was tall enough that we weren't going to be able to dig out, and so I had to back up about half a mile on this one lane dirt road, and it's a cliff on this side and it's up here on this side, and talk about terrified and cotton mouth, and I was really, really glad to have done that safely. And Ben was, he said, okay, move this way, that way. It was very scary. I'm glad to be alive.
I wonder where this was. This was out of Yellow Pine?
No. What's the town? Is it Chalice?
Oh, yeah.
On the east side?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you go in there?
Yeah, that's one way to do it.
And we had driven miles and miles and miles. So we may not... Well, I think the road goes in and out of the wilderness area over there, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to reach a camp spot that we would hike from. So we didn't reach that spot. We went back and camped somewhere else and then hiked in.
Maybe one or two more questions?
Sure, yeah.
What kind of a future would you like to see for Taylor Ranch?
Oh. I'd like to see it continue as a research station and make sure that the university supports it. I think it provides a really incredible and unique experience for students and for faculty. That sort of experience doesn't exist anywhere else, as far as I know. So I hope the college and the university continue to support it. And it's an opportunity to observe quietly what changes do happen, like you said, after the fire, to see what changes happen. I mean, that could be monitored year by year to see what changes. know how long it takes, know what comes in, whether, well, just what form succession takes there.
Do you think we can learn anything from observing change like that? As people, about ourselves, maybe?
Well, philosophically, sure. You know, you're not the same person you were when you were 10. I'm not the same person I was when I was 50. Yeah, I think we can learn about resilience. If nothing else, we can learn about resilience, and that whole idea that if it's not these plants at this time and these critters at this time, it'll be something else. As long as there are living things, they will come and occupy. And yeah, what do we learn? What can we learn about ourselves? I guess just that, resilience, and also, you know, things are born and things die, and to maybe to recognize our own mortality and ponder that, and to know that that's not such a bad thing. I mean, Dave knows I want to be cremated, where we both want to be cremated and put our ashes in the ground, and maybe that'll nurture some trees. I mean, we actually have designated where we want those to be, but I won't tell you. But then they get recycled. I don't want to be in a box, a metal box, and just have my ashes, my nutrients just go to waste. So maybe there's something in that. I think there's something about being a biologist that that helps you to understand that cycle of life, and how wonderful that is, that to think that your molecules are going to go on and nurture something new and different. Some little part of you is there. I don't think our consciousness will be there, but some part of us will be there. Isn't that comforting? It is to me, anyway.
Yeah, I was just reading an essay by a friend of a friend who is a biologist, a fish biologist, who described a salmon as a thing which transports metals from supernovae from the ocean up into these high drainages.
Right.
And it's just, life is just this crazy exchange that takes place over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Endlessly.
Yeah. Was that Katie Kavanaugh? Was she the one you talked to? Katie was doing that research when she was here in Idaho, and she measured nutrients that were deposited from the death of the salmon when they came upriver, and they would deposit their eggs and then they would die. And there were lots more nutrients in the places where they were than in the places where they weren't. And I don't remember if she went where the rivers were dammed to look at places where the salmon couldn't get to versus where they could. I think she did. And then I just heard on the radio this morning, I think it was a physicist, well, maybe it was, yeah, he's an astrophysicist. Actually, it was somebody who was in, is it the Rolling Stones? Or, no, it was Queen. One of the musicians in the band Queen is an astrophysicist.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He went back and got his PhD. I think it was either Queen or Rolling Stone. I think it was Queen. And he was saying, you know, Joni Mitchell was right. We are stardust. That all of our molecules are dust that came from the Big Bang, you know, from solar.
Star furnaces, yeah.
Yeah. So how cool is that to think about? We are stardust. And it gets recycled.